Level 1, Neophyte. You arrive at the Watch Fortress with your chapter's oaths still warm in your mouth, and the first thing anyone tells you is that none of it matters here anymore. Your colors get stripped from your armor before you found your quarters. Your chapter's battle cry earns you a corrected look from the veteran assigned to break you in, because Deathwatch doesn't fight for any one chapter's glory. It fights to keep a secret the Imperium can't survive knowing all at once, that the void between the stars holds things far worse than anything a hive worker ever prays isn't listening to them. You spend your first weeks relearning how to fight, not because you've forgotten, but because the Iron Hand standing beside you doesn't hold a line the way your own brothers do, and the Blood Angel behind him charges on an instinct that gets them both killed if you don't adjust your own reflexes to match his. Kill team doctrine has one rule every chapter's pride has to bend around. The team survives together, or it doesn't survive. You bend around it fast because the Marines who don't tend to become the reason someone else doesn't come back. Your first mission is nothing like the crusades you trained for. A hive world's underlevels have gone quiet in a pattern the Ordo Xenos doesn't like, and your kill team is sent in to confirm it before anyone with a voice loud enough to cause a panic finds out first. You find the Genestealer brood the same hour you find out 3 of the 8 Marines who walked in with you aren't walking back out. Nobody mourns them publicly. The mission report lists the objective as complete and the losses as acceptable, and acceptable is the only word this fortress has for a cost that got the job done quietly enough. You learn fast that the billions on that hive world will never know what almost happened under their feet, and that not being thanked for it is simply the price of the work. You also learn faster than you expected to which of your new brothers are worth watching your back and which are simply worth watching. A neophyte who talks too much about the things he's seen underground doesn't stay a neophyte long enough to become anything else, because Deathwatch has quieter ways of managing a loose tongue than a court-martial, and none of them require a hearing. Level 2, Battle Brother of the Long Vigil. A neophyte who survives his first tour without embarrassing his kill team stops being watched like a liability and starts being watched like an asset, which, among Deathwatch handlers, is a much more dangerous kind of attention. You get folded into a permanent kill team, 8 Marines pulled from 7 different chapters, none of whom owe each other anything except the fact that they're the ones left standing when the mission's done. You learn each of their tells before you learn most of their names, because knowing which brother hesitates half a second before a charge and which one doesn't is the difference between covering for it and dying because of it. The doctrine that gets drilled into you here isn't tactics. It's the vigil itself, the standard term every seconded Marine serves before his chapter can call him home, assuming his chapter still wants him back the way he left. Some brothers count the years. You stop counting somewhere around your second campaign once you realize the counting doesn't change anything about what's coming next. What's coming next is a purge inside the wreck of a research vessel that answers a distress call nobody official ever sent. Xenos tech is loose in the hold, the kind the Inquisition would rather see destroyed than studied, and your handler makes it clear before you board that recovery outranks survival on this one. You bring the tech back. You leave a black shield behind to make sure of it, a brother whose own chapter of origin was erased so completely that even he doesn't know it anymore, which is either the emptiest kind of sacrifice or the only kind Deathwatch actually trusts. Either way, nobody writes his name into the after-action report. The rest of your kill team doesn't talk about him afterward, and you understand within the week why. A black shield is a preview of what the long vigil can cost a Marine who stays inside it too long or asks the wrong question of the wrong handler, and nobody wants to be the one who says the thought out loud first. Level 3, Kill Team Leader. Your kill team leader takes a Xenos round through the throat 2 seasons later, and the mantle falls on you, not because anyone announces it, but because the Marine standing next to a dying leader when the Vox goes silent is simply expected to keep giving orders. Command among chapters that have spent 10,000 years insisting their own way of war is the correct one, is its own kind of battlefield. The Ultramarine in your squad follows your calls without complaint. The White Scar does too, eventually, but only after you prove in a firefight that your read on the enemy is faster than his pride wants to admit. You learn the arithmetic of it within a month. A kill team leader who hesitates loses the room before he loses the fight. You start making calls in half the time it used to take you, not because you're more certain, but because a kill team that watches its leader think out loud stops trusting the leader. You lose your first brother under your own command during a Tyrannid splinter cull on a frontier moon, a salamander who trusted your read on a bio-titan's blind spot that turned out not to exist. You don't apologize to the rest of the team for it. Apologizing would mean admitting the call was wrong instead of simply costly, and costly is the only currency Deathwatch actually keeps books in. What you do instead is start keeping your own private accounting of every brother's limits, who breaks left under pressure, who needs an order repeated to trust it, who would rather die proving a point about his own chapter than live having made yours. A kill team leader who only studies the enemy and never studies the 7 Marines standing next to him tends not to survive long enough to need a 9th kill team. Level 4. Watch Sergeant. Enough kill team leaders survive enough tours under you specifically that a watch station starts routing its harder objectives through your name before anyone else's. Being Watch Sergeant means commanding several kill teams at once, rather than fighting inside just one, which sounds like less danger and turns out to be a different danger entirely. Your handler from the Ordo Xenos starts briefing you personally now, which means you're also the first to hear the objectives that never make it into any report anyone outside this fortress will ever read. One of those objectives arrives disguised as a routine extraction. A world under quarantine has gone dark, and your handler wants a specific archive recovered before the planet is sanctioned for cleansing from orbit, which is inquisitorial language for erased along with everyone still breathing on it. You don't ask what's in the archive. Asking marks you as the kind of officer who needs to understand a mission instead of simply executing it, and that reputation follows you longer than any single failure would. You get the archive out. The planet burns 3 days later on a schedule that was decided before your team ever landed, and you're the only one among your brothers who knows that the timing was never about you at all. You start understanding that being trusted with the truth and being protected from consequences are 2 entirely different privileges, and Deathwatch has only ever offered you the first one. Your own kill teams start reading you differently after that, not with less loyalty exactly, but with the particular caution soldiers reserve for an officer who clearly already knows things he isn't saying. You let them think that. A watch sergeant who explains himself invites the kind of scrutiny that eventually reaches the handler giving the orders in the first place, and that scrutiny has never once landed anywhere good. Level 5 Watch Captain. A watch captain's seat opens when the previous holder dies the way most of them eventually do, not gloriously against some hive fleet's vanguard, but quietly in a debrief chamber. After an interrogation, his own Ordo handler decided he'd become too much of a liability to walk out of. Nobody in the fortress calls it what it was. You inherit his command, his half-finished campaigns, and an Inquisitor Lord who shows up within the week to make it clear you now answer to her personally rather than to any abstraction called the Ordo Xenos. She doesn't threaten you outright. She simply mentions, in the tone of someone discussing supply requisitions, that a fortress under a captain who asks too many questions tends to find itself reassigned to whichever front currently has the worst survival odds. You start signing off on objectives you'd have refused as a sergeant, not because you've stopped caring what they cost, but because you've learned exactly how thin the line is between a captain who's useful and a captain who becomes somebody else's cautionary example. Your own chapter master sends word asking when you'll be released from the vigil. You don't answer him for another 6 months because the honest answer is that you no longer entirely know whose Marine you are anymore. A watch captain from a neighboring fortress tries to claim 2 of your kill teams for his own front during a joint operation, arguing to the conclave that your losses prove you've mismanaged your vigil's resources. You solve it the way this rank solves most disputes, by making certain his own intelligence on the objective arrives a full day stale, so that when his warband walks into a strength he wasn't told about, the failure reads as his and the resources stay yours. Difficult problems in a fortress's ledgers are always somebody else's to answer for, provided you've arranged it that way first. Level 6 Crusade Commander. A Hive Fleet splinter turns 3 sectors into a running battle that outlasts any single fortress's resources, and command of the combined Deathwatch response across all of it lands on you specifically once the inquisitorial conclave decides your fortress has earned the trust. Running a crusade means every kill team across every world answers up through you, and it means the rival Ordos start treating you as a resource worth arguing over rather than a captain worth ignoring. An Ordo Hereticus interrogator wants a recovered world purged for contamination the moment your teams clear it. An Ordo Malleus representative wants a captured bioform kept alive for study. Your own instincts tell you is a mistake. You don't get to simply refuse either of them. You learn to make each Ordo believe the outcome they wanted was the one they got, whether or not it actually was. The campaign costs you kill teams faster than the fortress can replace them. Marines from chapters who send formal inquiries asking why their brothers were spent the way they were. You answer every one of those inquiries the same way, with the casualty count and the objective secured, because grief is not a currency the Long Vigil has ever traded in, and a commander who starts trading in it stops being trusted with anything that matters. The splinter is finally broken on the 4th month, at a cost that would end most chapter masters' careers, and barely earns you a line in the conclave's own private ledger. What earns you their attention instead is that you delivered the result at all. Your name starts appearing in briefings you're never invited to, mentioned by inquisitors who are already weighing whether you're an asset worth cultivating or a commander who's started to know too much to leave in the field much longer. Level 7, Fortress Lord Elect. A Fortress Lord's seat falls vacant when the conclave decides the current one has held command long enough to become a liability nobody can quite name a reason for yet, which among inquisitors is reason enough on its own. Your name comes up because it's already been circulating in briefings you were never present for. Being named Fortress Lord-elect means submitting to a scrutiny no campaign ever prepared you for, a joint interrogation by all 3 Ordos designed to find any crack a decade of Xenos exposure might have left in you that you haven't noticed yourself. You sit through sessions that pick apart every mission you've run since you were a neophyte, looking less for failure than for the kind of fascination with the things you've fought that no loyal servant of the Imperium is supposed to develop. You pass, though nobody tells you by how narrow a margin, and passing earns you only the right to stand before the full conclave and answer, without preparation, for how you would spend a fortress's worth of Deathwatch Marines against a threat they choose to name on the spot. They name a Hive Fleet vanguard that hasn't been publicly acknowledged to exist. You answer well enough that the room goes quiet instead of hostile, which among inquisitors is the closest thing to approval you will ever be offered directly, and quiet enough that you understand, walking out of that chamber, that you have just been trusted with a piece of the truth most of the Imperium will die, never having been told. Level 8, Fortress Lord. You have the command now, an entire watch fortress answering to you, its watch captains, its kill teams, its archives of Xenos horrors. Most of the Imperium will never be trusted to learn exist. Your own chapter stopped expecting you home years ago, and you've stopped being able to say with total honesty that you'd go back even if they asked. You are, in every practical sense, a black shield now, whatever colors your armor still carries underneath the Deathwatch black. A rival fortress lord tests you within your first year, feeding a false objective up through your own Ordo Xenos handler in the hope that your failure gets logged before his does. You survive it easily enough, and you use it quietly to make sure the Conclave hears exactly whose intelligence it actually was. You don't take it personally. Taking it personally would mean you'd misunderstood the entire structure you spent your whole vigil climbing. The conclave that elevated you is the same conclave that will remove you the moment your judgment stops matching theirs, and you understand, the way every fortress lord eventually does, that command this high hasn't freed you from being watched. It's simply given the watchers a better reason to keep looking. Somewhere below the fortress, in quarters he hasn't finished unpacking, a fresh Marine is having his chapter's colors stripped from his armor for the first time, being told by a veteran he's never met that none of it matters here anymore. He doesn't know yet what he'll be asked to forget in order to survive the vigil, or how much of himself he'll have already traded away by the time anyone thinks to call him Fortress Lord. Deathwatch doesn't remember its neophytes, its sergeants, or even most of its fortress lords by name for very long. It only remembers, vaguely and without ceremony, that the vigil never actually ends. It just changes whose watch it currently is. If this vigil was worth your time, hit like and subscribe for the next.